Australia, they're going to cop one late. When you're hot, you are hot. To make it not only the most points the Wallabies have conceded in a test match, but the heaviest loss in the history. Carreras sneaks it in, and it's 67-27 at the close. It's a record loss for Australia. We have never seen numbers like them, and they are all in favour of Los Pumas.
A record demoralising defeat for the Wallabies, 67-27 loss to Argentina in Santa Fe. I'm Christy, Doran. Joining me to recap what just occurred in South America is Tony Harper. Harps, we woke up hoping from an Australian perspective that the Wallabies would be able to go back to back. And at one point in time, it looks like they might have been able to when they took a 20-3 lead after 30 minutes. But blimey, what did we just witness in the next 50 minutes?
Christy, there's been 663 Wallabies matches since 1903. And I reckon you've seen a good fair few of those. I don't know that I've ever seen anything quite like it because, as you say, at 20-3 up, it looked like we were cruising and it looked like happy times under Joe Schmidt. You know, the sunny days were back, the rain had gone, we were looking at a Santa Fe stroll in the sunshine, and then it just went nuts. And like, it's just, Harry Wilson called it gutting. I think anyone who cares about this Wallabies team must just be feeling shocked today. We've had quite a few people. I did the live blog and a few comments on there of people coming in very late in the game, just absolutely astonished by it. You know, I know as a rugby fan, with after all these defeats, and I cop this a bit myself, claims of negativity, but I really just don't know how to get out of wallowing about that today. It was just, I don't know where to start, mate.
All right. Well, I'll try to bring us back to making some sense of the defeat. Now, Joe Schmidt described it as the Wallabies falling off a cliff, and I think that's particularly apt because they did. There was 4 tries in the last 10 minutes, and the resurgence, the hope, the glimmer of hope that the Wallabies had when Tate McDermott had some quick feet, some quick thinking, somehow managed to evade 5 Pumas defenders to cross, and it just looks like Simba and the Stampede there, didn't it? This little kid, basically, and fair play to him. Fair play to Tom Liner for knocking over the conversion to make it 2 converted tries, but the Wallabies did fall off a cliff after that. And you look through some of the stats, and stats can sometimes tell a story. Sometimes they can camouflage what really occurred. Here, I think they're pretty apt. 11 penalties to 5. We saw the Wallabies scrum struggle. Argentina were dominant there, particularly in the second half when Angus Bell and Taniela Tupou left. But the really definitive statistic, I reckon, is 17 offloads to 2. And we just saw the Wallabies unable to withstand Argentina, the pace that they played at, the clean, the carry, and the width that they then played. And I agree with you. It is difficult to look past a record defeat, and I don't think we should either. And that's probably the important thing to say here is that, you know, we are fans of the game. That's why we become, you know, sports journalists. But at the end of the day, we're journos. We have to look at it in a critical lens, don't we, Harps? And a 40-point defeat is the most points they've conceded. It's definitely the most since 1997 when they copped a hammering to the Box in Pretoria. Another hiding occurred 10 years later or so up at Ellis Park in Johannesburg. But that's about, you know, the wheels did totally come off, didn't they?
Yeah, look, there were 30 missed tackles as well, which I think is another pretty telling statistic. And I want to ask you, I know you're a big fan of the man, but the defence coach, Laurie Fisher, and what's going on there, whether we need to start looking at that. Is there something in Joe Schmidt's decision to bring in 16 new players and to completely, you know, he's talked about the injury effects as well, but this looks like a completely all-at-sea selection at the moment. And he is talking about building depth in the program, but we're just seeing, you know, that maybe some of this depth, they've not been near the Wallabies before for a good reason. Josh Cannon came on, he missed 3 tackles in a very short time on the field. You know, I don't want to single him out because it was like watching, for me, it was like being at the World Cup and watching the All Blacks play, I think, Uruguay, and just absolutely storming from all angles, all different sides. It was a complete, you know, torrents of attack. But for the Wallabies, you know, like maybe our expectations are too high, but just to see them under that kind of assault from that team, and like people will say, you know, make sure you give the Pumas credit, and all credit to them. I mean, they were fabulous to watch. The new fly half, Albornoz, he was like sensational, brilliant with the boot, but really ran the game. And then, you know, he comes up with that covering tackle, his face straining, like the look on his face as he mowed down Marika, you know, and we'll get to Marika, I'm sure, later as well. But just like they had it everywhere. And again, they didn't have it in the first 30 minutes. But like, yeah, getting back to the question, like what's going on with our defence there?
Well, yeah, so you brought up Laurie Fisher. Look, there was 30 missed tackles to 24. So that's what I mean. Like sometimes, like clearly the Wallabies have conceded many more line breaks. And so Argentina concedes 24 missed tackles. So it does kind of weigh it up a little bit about what does that mean. The offloads means that they've lost the contact battle. And to me, you know, they lost the scrum battle in the second half. So you're immediately going back. So you're just not going to be able to slow down the defensive line, the attacking line, because you're already on the back foot, because you're getting overpowered. And so I think it's slightly less about, clearly they want to wrap up the ball a little bit more. We know that Joe Schmidt talks a lot about the chop tackle. That's why people like Ryan Smith were missed out originally and actually hasn't played a test match, because he was a high defender with his tackle technique. So I think we saw from the 30-minute mark, shortly after, Taniela Tupou goes off after 35 minutes. At halftime, Angus Bell goes off. And you lose those two, your two best ball carriers in the tight 5, and immediately that just depowers the whole Wallabies forward pack. And
look, that's true, but the guys that are replacing them, they're two of the most, well, one of them is the most experienced Wallaby of all time, and the other guy is the person many people believe should be captain. I mean, that's like, you know, you've got, like he's building depth, but you've got to have depth in those two roles. Are those guys just not, are they not performing this season? Are there issues there? Is, you know, what's the issue up front there in that scrum that you can bring those two guys on, but it still looks like it looked?
Well, we know that Alan Alatoa has come back from an Achilles injury. I don't think he's at the best, at the peak of his powers at the moment, and it takes a long time to get past that. I think he'd probably admit he's not his best. Last week, he came off and made an impact. James Slipper struggled, I think, a little bit, but we've got to remember at 30 degrees, they got the ascendancy, and momentum is so crucial with that. You know, it turns so quickly. So I think you've got to think about it, not just isolated about one or two players, but what is the knock on? And we saw without Lukan Salakaia-Lote coming on, you know, the immediate dents that you can gain early on can have an impact later on in the match. So no Lukan Salakaia-Lote, the biggest player in that back 5 forwards. And yes, Jeremy Williams made some initial gains early on from the kick restart, but I think it's a combination of all those things that impacts where the scrum gets to. But they're valid questions, and it comes back to depth. We know that the Wallabies struggled last year at the World Cup without Taniela Tupou, without Will Skelton, and we can't understate how significant their losses were for their campaign, and we saw it once again. And it says a little bit about where Tupou is at from a fitness perspective, that he's taken off with 5 minutes to go in the first half. Now, we see South Africa make those decisions all the time, but they bring on one of the best props in the world, generally speaking, and they have that bomb squad to be able to do that. I don't think the Wallabies have a bomb squad, and this is why we'll continue to talk about, do they have the depth? Can they afford not to look abroad? And they're the things that you and I talk about, and Matt Tuvor talks about regularly, is I don't think there's the depth in Australian rugby at the moment, and we probably copped another reality check from that right then over the last couple of hours.
I think absolutely, and you're right. We have spoken about that. I'd be keen to know who you think could come in and whether they should be raced in for these Bledisloes, because you really do fear what's coming down the path over the next few weeks, don't you? And the one guy that brought back, I think he was one of the worst players out there. And again, Marika, and it's hard again to look at that, but he should be scoring that try. He shouldn't be nailed into touch by a fly half there. He just dropped one absolutely cold, like an absolute basic. And he's your guy who's coming in from overseas as a beacon to inspire, and they're not even getting that right. So even the experienced players, they're blooding players, and some of them are going, okay, I agree, Jeremy Williams started quite well. It was a neat bit of play from Max Jorgensen in the Callaway try to be there and feed him back in on the inside as well. So the new guys are going okay, but the old guys they're really struggling, aren't they? The back row was absolutely dominated this time. They were very good a week ago, but this week the Pumas back row was all over them.
It talks about the depth, though. Argentina's made a couple of changes, but they've made proactive changes. I know that there was a couple of injuries for the Wallabies, and yes, no Noah Lolosio, no Tom Wright, backline shuffle. They didn't lose the game because of those decisions, though, did they? You said, can they bring anyone in? I don't think they can at this point in time. They're going to come back on Tuesday. They'll regather on Saturday, I believe, and then you're into a test week. The person that you could bring in to help the forward pack is a Brandon Paenga-Amosa, one of the best, probably the best scrummaging hooker in Australia. I imagine we'll see him against the All Blacks, but you're bringing him back against one of the best sellers in the world. So that's the tricky thing, that Australia's, he's not been playing club rugby recently. He's been touring. So hopefully he is match fit and can make an impact. I think you'll see Liam Wright, Fraser McWright come back into the mix. They will be able to slow down the breakdown. They'll be able to add some impact there. You've got to remember Carlo Giussano, he's been superb, but he's played a couple of matches now, hasn't he? Four tests. But you've got to remember the wear and tear. When you haven't played that level of football, to then go on and have to be playing 80 minutes every week, it's just not an easy thing. So I want to highlight a couple of things in the second half, which are areas where when they look back, they'll go, this is where we lost the game. And Marika's drop ball was definitely one of them, but it was followed shortly after by the Wallabies penalised for not retreating from a clearing kick from Ben Donaldson, who had a great first half, I thought. Second half, struggled with his clearing kick exits. But I think it was around the 56-minute mark where Jake Gordon is penalised for not retreating. And the referee was very clear, retreat, guys, you've got to show. And Michael Hooper said, well, what does it mean? It means actually like not just standing still. You've got to take steps back towards the bloke who kicked the ball. So the fact that they go from a clearing exit, they're probably going to be making a defensive tackle around the halfway line or the 10-metre line. They end up having a scrum 7 metres out. They concede a penalty, scrum 5 metres out. And that attritional battle there, the Wallabies lose because of the inaccuracies that they showed from Max Jorgensen going into touch a couple of times there. So they had a terrible opening 15 minutes of that second half.
They did, but also when Argentina got into those positions, it just seemed way too easy as well. They got close to the line and they scored. And even, you talked about it, I think, in the match report where they had a disallowed try when Lavini got in the way of Kremer, but then also Matera, he went to put the ball down and he actually put it down short and then it rolled forward. They could have scored even more points from close range as well. That close range defence was just non-existent at times. They
The one exception of that, and it actually ended up being a negative result for the Wallabies, but Josh Nasser comes on and makes an impact immediately with the turnover.
Yeah.
But shortly after, I think it was Rob Ballatini that gets pushed
he
backwards.
was. Yeah.
And it results in another 5-metre scrum. So generally speaking, I think, they were probably wanting a settler, get a little bit closer to infield to be able to make the clearing kick and allow for a bit more territory to peel off there. But that's another area where they'll go far out. We've really made a hash of that because Rob Valentini shouldn't be getting pushed back beyond his own goal line. So you need some more match players to get over there.
Well, they've conceded 5 maul tries leading up to today, but also then today wasn't so bad in that area, but their softness within 5 metres is really evident. Like they're just not able to withstand. There's not that culture at the moment of being able to soak up phases and body on the line. They talk about it. Joe talked about the pride that they've got and all the rest of it. I don't think they're not putting in, obviously, but there is something breaking down in terms of their resilience in close areas.
Well, what we're seeing is the result of a very young side, a young Wallabies team still coming together, a young leadership team, but also the fact that they've struggled they don't have that mental resolve and fortitude, which is what you get from winning over many years. We see it with the Springboks. They managed to claw their way back, and last week the Wallabies actually managed to stay in the hunt. They were helped by Argentina, who struggled. But look, I think we've got to it looks like doom and gloom. A 40-point defeat's not not great at all. The one area I think Joe Schmidt was right, though, in highlighting was the fact that they've actually won 3 out of the 4 halves that they played have actually been of test standards. So they had one half, which was shocking, but they'll leave Argentina. If you had have said to Joe Schmidt, you get 1 win on this tour, he absolutely takes it every day of the week because they can come back, and New Zealand's not flying high at the moment. They've lost 3 from 4 themselves, so it's a very competitive TRC. I want to just
I kind of question Joe's. Sorry, Christy. I kind of question Joe's maths there a bit as well because he's claiming the first half today was a win, but the last 10 minutes they've led in 2 tries. They're leading 20-3, and they need to just be stable, get to halftime with a decent enough lead, and they've just they've been overrun then, and it's just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. So he's definitely sugarcoating, and that's his job, I guess. But to come out and say, records will be broken and that Argentina scored 38 against the All Blacks in New Zealand and, no one had ever done that. And, and that it's kind of not that. He was, for mine, he's playing it down way too much. And I guess what else can he do? And he's found himself with this in a position he's probably not used to being in. But I really found a distinct lack of, standing up and taking accountability, I guess, post-match from Joe. Hopefully, he was asked if he would go in with a fire and brimstone approach to the players, a bit of a checker blast, as we have seen famously in the past. And he's not the guy to do that. And
it's not the right time.
Tearing scripts off the wall is going to help. Not the right time, right?
No, because it's if they had another test in Argentina next weekend, sure, it might be the right time. But they're about to get on a flight. They've got 2 weeks. You don't need to do it now. You save it for your review in a week's time when they've had a couple of days off, where they can be, freshened up a little bit, and they can come back with having worked out where it went wrong. I don't think it is the right time to have that fire and brimstone that was asked, and we spoke about it on the post-match presser as well with half a dozen other Aussie journos. Just there were some positives. The first half now was good. Angus Bell, immense with his ball carrying. He nearly crossed the line himself. Taniela Tupou, we saw his creativity with his hands, particularly around the tram tracks. Nick Frost, I thought, had a superb first half as well. We saw Jeremy Williams have a couple of good moments too. Donaldson was effective in the first half, a lovely decision to take the short side, create an overlap with some really good hands from Ikitau, Kellaway, Jorgensen back to Kellaway to score. So they were the positives. I think it's important just to highlight those. Cesano, another 17 tackles. He's finally missed one as well. So at least that Tupou and Bell, when they're up front, you've got a scrum that will... I don't think they're the world's best scrummagers, not Bell anyway, but they're very much going to give you the ball-carrying ability that you need. And Frost is growing with his maturity. His work at the line-out was impressive today too.
The important thing, though, to consider with Bell and Tupou is they're not 80-minute players. They're not even 60-minute players at the moment. And while that's the case, while they're still battling back and struggling, the reality is that it leaves Australia weakened when they come off. I agree with, I thought Ben Donaldson did look sharp until he didn't, until the heat kind of started, until the game started flowing the other way. When it was all sunshine and roses for Australia, he was actually pretty good. And it's, interesting. It'll be interesting to see, especially on the raw.com.au, how divided the audience is by Noah, just how that kind of plays, how whether that was Noah's, shifted back even further in the thinking due to his injury. I'll be keen to see that. Tate was good when he came on. The try you spoke about earlier, that was a fun moment, but it was like a rare ray, wasn't it, in a very dour half. But he has that ability. We've seen that plenty before, where he'll take that quick tap and go and really catch people off guard. There were some nice little steps in there, and off he went. So yeah, there were some positives. Andrew Kellaway's been stuck out on a wing in a Joe Schmidt team. It must be the loneliest job in world football, world rugby, to be out there in the last few weeks, especially in the rain. So good to see him come in and cross over the line for that try as well. But I think we're really we're scratching around, aren't we?
Yeah, you're not wrong. And it's an interesting one. And maybe it's the question that we leave and we discuss and we finish on, is this around the number 10 situation, because it is still very much a conundrum. Who is the best long-term option for the Wallabies at 10? Because, yeah, Dono did look impressive when there was some front football in that first 30 minutes, but few 10s are going to ever be able to turn a side around, particularly under that sort of wave of pressure that the Wallabies copped in the second half and the last 10 minutes of that first half as well. So, yeah, I think that Noah probably does come back to start against the All Blacks, but there's so much uncertainty around that number 10 position at the moment. And I don't know if we've found out too much more from the result that's just occurred.
No, I totally agree with that. I'm not sure. Tom Liner seemed to go okay, but there were 26 points scored from the Pumas from the 71st minute on. So again, he didn't really have a lot of chances with ball in hand to show his wares either, did he? And as I said earlier, the Argentine fly half, he looked exceptional in response, like the kind of player we would love to have in that jersey right now.
It's very easy. We've got to remember in a second half when you've got 35,000, it's 30 degrees, you got your tails up. Most 10s do start to come into their own when you get to play behind a forward pack that's completely dominant, which is what they were in that second half. So you just saw even Slipper got turned over midway through that second half, and they just had acres of space to work with. So they were catching thin air a lot of the time, the Wallabies. How they go about slowing the breakdown against the All Blacks is going to be crucial. We know that Scott Robertson's had a real desire to ensure that they win the breakdown. They've been playing three Lucy's like Ethan Blackadder, Kane, Sevilla, guys that go hard on the ball, that pressure will come on the Wallabies in 2 weeks from the All Blacks. There's no doubt about it. And we'll find out more about whether or not I think Joe Schmidt's desire to continue to look inwards, if it can't handle the heat against the All Blacks, I think they'll have to look to a foreign injection come the spring tour. I just don't think that there's the starch in this current crop of 30, 35, 40 players in Australian rugby at the moment to withstand the heat, that the furnace that is international rugby. So, yeah, I don't think we'll see Scott Seo against the All Blacks. I don't think we'll see guys like Richie Arnold or Will Skelton, but those sorts of figures have to be considered long-term or middle term if the Wallabies don't get some responses against the All Blacks in 2 weeks' time in Sydney.
No, I don't think it's going to make any difference at all, because I think the All Blacks are going to come up against this Wallabies and absolutely steamroll them. But one crumb of comfort is that the All Blacks have lost to the Springboks again overnight as well. That's the fourth time in a row, first time in 75 years that they've lost 4 in a row to the Springboks. It probably says a lot more about how bloody good the world champions are than how bad Scott Robertson's team is. But, something to cling on to. They're more fallible than they've been for a while.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I know that Matt and I will break that game down more on the pod early next week. I think that's about a wrap. It's a disappointing one. It's not quite the leisurely start to Father's Day last Sunday, where the game was at 8:00. You finished at 10. You had a coffee in hand, a bacon and egg roll. There's a fair bit of disappointment in the air in Australian rugby at the moment, but I don't think that. And my last point, I don't think that dancing around those issues by playing it down is the solution. I think there has to be a strong, proper look at where the Wallabies are at the moment. And hopefully we've provided a little bit of that analysis. Hopefully it's not been too down, this discussion, but it's a real reality check when you're copping 67 points from Argentina. It's not been done. It's 20 more points than the Wallabies have ever copped previously from Los Pumas, which was 2 years ago under Dave Rennie. So, Anyway, Tony, great to have you on the pod. Hopefully you have. I just want
to say one thing. There'll be a few people out there who tell you not to buy the negativity and to stay upbeat about this. But I just want you to know that if you, like me, feel absolutely crap about what transpired today, then you're absolutely in your rights to take on that negativity and to work through that process. Okay, so you don't feel bad about it. If you feel like you've been let down, if you feel like you want to take your Wallabies jersey and stick it in the back of the cupboard, you do whatever gets you through the next few days, because I think Justin Harrison said this defeat will haunt the players for the rest of their lives. And if you feel that way as well, then that's all right with me.
Well, on that note, have a good Sunday.
You too, mate.
Thanks for joining us on the Royal Podcast.
Gotcha.